I think we're still struggling with, and I think Billy brought it up, with this issue of looking at different forms of violence differently, whether it's gang-related, domestic violence, gun violence. The mandate of our office is to deal primarily with gang-related violence. The risk factors that tend to push youth between ages 10 to 15 to identify themselves as a gang member. The term gang, I think, has a way of dehumanizing people, and we don't tend to look at them as young men and women. If a gang member gets killed, we tend to neutralize that episode. Given that, what we've done is that we've implemented a comprehensive strategy that's made up of 16 different programs that get implemented in very, very small zones. While LA is over 400 square miles, and we work primarily in the city, the areas that we have chosen to work in are less than 4 square miles. They're defined as gang reduction and youth development zones, but they're pretty much marginalized neighborhoods with 40% higher level of gang crime than other parts of the city, 55% of foster care youth that attend LAUSD attend schools in those zones, 31% of youth on probation attend schools in those zones, and anywhere from 30 to 40% of youth that live in those communities, the grandparents are financially responsible for them. And about 30% of the families live below the poverty line. The issue of guns in those communities is a very relevant one, in that these are communities that have learned to negotiate conflict through violence. So our major emphasis for the last 3 years have been to reduce levels of violence. We fully understand. For example, we know that over the last, since 2007, we've been able to reduce homicides by 33% in those grid zones versus 15% outside of the grid zones. There's been a 48% reduction in assaults with a deadly weapon against police officers in those grid zones versus 9% outside. However, reducing violence is one benchmark, and it does not really tell us what Billy was talking about, those protective factors and that community resiliency. Just a little bit of an anecdote. A little bit over a year ago, we had 5 homicides within 2 blocks in a community in South LA, and I was at all of them. And at the last one, I had a very unusual thought. About less than 20 yards from the yellow tape, there was a young girl jumping rope. And I had this thought that went through my mind that I initially asked myself, what kind of parent would allow a kid to be jumping ropes so close to a yellow tape? And it hit me like a ton of bricks that this is normal in that community. So yes, we've been able to reduce violence through very effective strategies, including the Summer Night Lights program, our intervention programs that interrupt violence, the secondary prevention program that reduces risk factors through a family approach with those kids that are 10 to 15-year-olds. But the normal in these communities, most of it has not shifted. And that's really the long-term task.